If you're trying to save fuel, you've probably heard the classic advice. Turn off the air conditioner, roll down the windows, and let the outside air cool you down. It sounds perfectly logical. After all, the AC has to work, and working the AC puts an extra load on the engine. But then there's another problem. When you open the windows, your car has to push through all that air rushing inside. So which one actually saves more fuel? Open windows or air conditioning? The surprising answer is, it depends. And the deciding factor is something you might not expect: how fast you're driving. Today we're breaking down what actually happens to your car when you choose fresh air over AC, and whether this old fuel-saving trick still makes sense. Right here, on History of Simple Things. Air conditioning wasn't always something you could simply switch on from the dashboard. Early automobile cooling systems were experimental and bulky, and practical factory-installed automotive air conditioning appeared in the late 1930s. One of the earliest commercially available systems was introduced by Packard in 1939. For decades, however, car air conditioning remained expensive and relatively uncommon. As systems became smaller, more reliable, and easier to operate, AC gradually became a normal feature in passenger vehicles. That created a new question for drivers. Does staying cool cost you more gasoline? Researchers have been investigating that question for decades. Studies from the late 1970s and early 1980s compared air conditioning with open windows, and more modern testing has continued to show that there isn't one answer that applies to every vehicle and every speed. Let's start with the easy part. When you turn on your car's air conditioner, you're not just turning on a fan. The AC system uses a compressor to circulate refrigerant and remove heat from the cabin. In a conventional gasoline-powered vehicle, that compressor is driven by the engine. That means the engine has to do additional work. The exact fuel penalty varies depending on the vehicle, outside temperature, humidity, AC setting, and driving conditions. In one set of tests by Consumer Reports, running the AC on an 85° Fahrenheit, or about 29 degrees Celsius, day reduced fuel economy by roughly 1 to 4 miles per gallon, depending on the vehicle. So yes, the AC can use additional fuel, but that doesn't automatically mean opening the windows is always better. Here's where things get interesting. A moving car already has to push air out of the way. Engineers spend enormous amounts of time shaping vehicles to reduce aerodynamic drag because fighting the air requires energy. Now imagine opening the windows. Instead of air smoothly flowing around the outside of the vehicle, some of that airflow enters the cabin and disturbs the air moving around the car. Depending on the vehicle and how the windows are opened, this can increase aerodynamic drag. And aerodynamic drag becomes increasingly important as speed rises. That's why the same open window strategy that makes sense crawling through city traffic can become less attractive on a highway. Research from Oak Ridge National Laboratory tested two vehicles, a 2009 Ford Explorer and a 2009 Toyota Corolla, under different conditions. Between roughly 40 and 70 miles per hour, or 64 to 113 kilometers per hour, maximum AC generally consumed more fuel than driving with the windows down. But the results changed at higher speeds, and the crossover point depended on the vehicle. In other words, there isn't a magic speed where every car suddenly switches from windows to AC. At lower speeds, opening the windows can be a reasonable way to stay comfortable without putting the extra load of maximum AC on the engine. Think city streets, neighborhood roads, or slower traffic. The aerodynamic penalty from open windows tends to matter less when you're moving slowly. A 2010 study examining vehicle aerodynamics found that open windows could use less fuel than air conditioning at lower speeds, while aerodynamic drag became much more significant as speed increased. But there's an important distinction. Opening the windows doesn't mean you should drive around with every window completely down all the time. How much the windows are opened, which windows are opened, the vehicle's shape, outside temperature, wind direction, and driving speed can all change the result. And if you're sitting in stop-and-go traffic under a blazing sun, opening the windows might simply make you uncomfortable without producing much practical benefit. This is where the traditional advice starts to flip. At highway speeds, keeping the windows closed generally gives the vehicle better aerodynamics. That's one reason the U.S. Department of Energy recommends opening the windows briefly to let a hot cabin vent out, then using the AC at highway speeds. Ford gives similar guidance. At lower speeds, open windows can make sense, while at highway speeds, keeping the windows closed and using AC is generally more aerodynamic. And there's another practical reason. If you're driving 60 or 70 miles per hour with the windows fully open, you're not exactly creating a calm, comfortable breeze. You're creating a small wind tunnel inside your car. It's noisy, the airflow can be unpleasant, and depending on the weather, you're also inviting heat and humidity into the cabin. So even if the fuel savings were small, the comfort trade-off may not be worth it. So, do open windows really save more fuel than AC? Sometimes. At lower speeds, opening the windows can be more fuel efficient than running the AC, depending on the vehicle and conditions. But at highway speeds, aerodynamic drag can make open windows less efficient, and using the AC with the windows closed can become the better choice. So the old advice wasn't completely wrong, it was just missing a crucial detail. Speed matters. If you're cruising slowly through town on a pleasant day, enjoy the breeze. But once you're heading down the highway, roll those windows up, turn on the AC, and let the engineer's aerodynamic work do its job. Because sometimes the most fuel-efficient choice isn't the one that feels the most obvious. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.